Morning, friends. We're going to get started. Good morning, everybody. All right, hello. So, all right, it's a Friday, which I know for many of us means work from home and sweatpants day. I appreciate you all getting dressed up this morning and joining us here for the Charles River Chamber's annual Fall Business Breakfast. My name is Greg Riedman. It is a pleasure to see you all. I'm so grateful to each and every one of you for being here this morning and being part of this chamber and being active in our communities. Thank you very much. I especially want to express my gratitude to Needham Bank, our presenting sponsor today. Is Joe Campanelli here with us? I think he's on his way, if not. But to Joe and to Needham Bank, we're so appreciative of the bank's support of this event and of all our programming all year round. Thank you very much for that. And a shout out to our friends at the Village Bank. Joe DeVito and his team are here with us once again, our platinum sponsor for the chamber. And I'd like to invite you all to go to page 3 of your program, where you'll see the list of all of our sponsors. I think it's page 3. Yep, page 3 of the program, where you'll see the list of all the sponsors who make today possible and make so much of our programming possible. The BID Needham, Newton Wellesley Hospital, Boylston Properties, Direct Federal Credit Union, InSource Services, UMass Amherst, and everyone else listed there. You know, it's a lot of names, and each and every one of them matters because they make what we do possible, not just today, but throughout the year. And they're really important names and important that I'm grateful to all of you for your support and to those organizations and everyone else who supports the chamber throughout the year. I want to introduce a few people this morning who are here. I'll start with Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller, who's with us this morning. So some of you may remember, if you were here last year, we try to organize this thing. We try to make sure we know what we're doing here, but we always forget to do something. And last year we needed to move the podium, and we had forgotten to assign someone to move the podium. I think we've got that taken care of today. But so the mayor took charge. She got Megan Jopp from Wellesley, and she got Kate Fitzpatrick from Needham, and George Parakis from Watertown, and the four of them just moved the podium off the stage. So Mayor, thank you for being here. We were not going to ask you to move the podium this year. We have a different job for you this morning, and we'll be hearing from her a little later, but thank you for that. I want to recognize our friends from Needham. Kate Fitzpatrick with her team. Representative Denise Garlick, I believe, is in the room. And the Needham folks, Representative, thank you very much. And the chair of the Board of Select Board, Marianne Cooley, along with Kate and some other people. And JP, their new Economic Development Director, is also with us this morning, right, Jay? JP. And we have the entire Wellesley Select Board with us this morning. I'm grateful to all of you for being here and to Megan and everyone else that's part of that team. And a welcome to Corey Testa, who's the newest person to join the town hall there. So thank you very much. We have 10 Newton City councilors in the room. Pretty amazing. Council President is with us, Susan Albright. Where's the city council folks? Oh, there you go. So, and I also want to give a special shout out to Deb Crosley, who is chair of the Zoning and Planning Committee and has just concluded a 3-year effort putting together a proposal to rezone Newton's villages in a way that I think is really important and significant. It's going to bring more vitality to our villages, more housing that we need both for our residents and for our seniors to age into, for our young people to actually be able to live in the community, and for our workers to be able to work in the community where they live, to live in the community where they work. And we're going to be doing the same kind of zoning work in the next year in Needham and in Watertown and in Wellesley, and it's also really important that we get behind supporting this and creating these opportunities. So thank you very much to Deb and the Newton and the other communities that are going to be doing that. Barney Heath is also here. It's his team that really organized that plan that we talked about, along with John Sisson, the planning director and the economic development director. And then I have 2 more groups of people I want to introduce this morning. First, we all know how terrible and how hard it's been to hire at least the past few years, and to find talent. Housing is part of the solution, but also making sure that our students are trained properly and have the skills they need. So I wanted to recognize our partners in higher ed who are with us this morning. Eric Turner, president of LaSalle College, is with us. Nick Cavino, president of William James. Dean Larry Ward from Babson College is with us. Jeff Knoyer from UMass Boston is here. And Colleen Coffrey from Mass Bay is also in the room. So let's give an applause to We all need to do better and work with our higher ed partners to make sure that our workforce has the skills they need for the challenges we need. And so these institutions are really important. And then there's another group of folks I wanted to acknowledge who are equally important to the vitality and democracy in our communities, and that is our local media. And if you remember, the last few years I've been railing about how we've had no local reporters in most of our communities. Really, the demise of local media has been terrible for our communities. We actually have really good independent news sites covering all 4 of the chamber communities this morning. So I know that I saw Charlie Brightrose from the Watertown News here. And Charlie's been doing this for a while, as well as Bob and Deb Brown from the Swellesley Reporter here. But relatively new to our communities, are 2 independent nonprofit sites that cover Newton. Fig City News, we've got Bruce Henderson with us, and the Newton Beacon, we have Brian McGonigal here. And then we have 2 in Needham now as well. We've got the Needham Observer with Peter O'Neill and his team who are here, and Needham Local with Cameron Mossberger, who just began a couple weeks ago. But really significant that we have eyes and ears on our community and ability to tell the stories of what we do and explain issues to people and to promote our economic and cultural vitality. So let's give a round of applause to our free press. And give them a round of applause, but they deserve our eyeballs on their sites and their coverage, and they deserve our financial support too, because that is how this works. If we do not support them, they will not be able to be sustainable. So thank you for that. All right, let's talk about today's program and what you can hear. We're so honored to have Dr. Rochelle Walensky with us this morning. She'll be receiving our annual RL Tennant Award. We'll talk more about that, but Dr. Walensky, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. Rich Gotham from the undefeated Boston Celtics will be joining us. And all along with Michael Holley from NBC Sports, who will be talking with Rich and making that part of the conversation. Does anyone know who now Rich has been the team president for 15 years. Who knows who the last Celtics president was? No? Red Auerbach. Someone said, yes, Red Auerbach. So that's quite the job to take Red Auerbach's place. So anyway, we're really delighted that Rich is going to be with us this morning. Finally, a word about your chamber. And it's been a pretty good year for us. It's been a couple years since we rebranded and grew into Watertown and to Wellesley, and it's gone well, and it's nice to see so many people. And do take a look at the list out in the front lobby of all the new members who've joined us this past year. This year, the Boston Business Journal reported that you are now all members of the 5th largest chamber in Massachusetts. When membership director Lisa Alcock joined us, she's there in the right, waving there, we were 14. And it's been a decade since Lisa's joined us, so it's quite the accomplishment. We appreciate it. And I did want to introduce one more person. Is Puya Anlib here? Are you here? Oh, I know he was expected. Anyway, Puya is with the IT consulting company Evox 365, and this year he became the 1,000th member to join our chamber. So thank you all, and it's a balance for us. It's great to be large and to be able to have a collective large voice on Beacon Hill and regionally when advocating for issues, but we also know deeply that it's important to pay attention to each and every one of our communities separately, and we work hard to do both of those. So appreciate all your support in making that possible. All right, our success would not be possible without our chamber team, Catherine Hare, Lisa Elcock, who I mentioned, Tracy Antania, Maxim Isaac, and Sarah Ross. Please give them a round of applause. They're the ones who really make this all happen. And none of our success would be possible without our chamber team, without our board of directors and our committees and my incredibly supportive board of directors. And I'd like to invite John Rufo, who is chair of our board, to come up and say hello and talk to you and introduce our first speaker.
Good morning, everybody. It is great to see so many people here this morning. And I have the honor of introducing our first speaker, but there's a couple things I want to talk to you about first as we do that. One is in the carrying on with the recognition of people. I'd like to recognize our board of directors. So anyone who's on the board, if you could please stand to be recognized by by everyone who's here today. Thank you for your leadership and your participation. It's so appreciated. Thank you very much. And also anyone who is a past board member, if I can ask you to stand and be recognized, just to show the continuity here. I think there are some in the room, so. Thank you, everybody. It's we cannot do the work that we do without the board. It's really a very important thing. So thank you for that. I want to talk briefly as a segue to introducing you to our first speaker about what the Chamber has planned for next year. In 2019, we actually wrote a strategic plan. A lot has happened since 2019. So in 2024, we're undertaking a new writing of a strategic plan. And I wanted to tell you about what the 5 areas of focus are that we've identified. And they're all interconnected, and there are subcategories to this. But just so you generally get the idea of what we're thinking about focusing our advocacy and our programming efforts on. And one of my main messages here is that we really want to hear from you. I think an engaged community and an engaged board that actually talks and lets their opinions be known is really critical. So we want to hear from you about everything, but especially about these things. And they're in no particular order here. The first one is transportation. I don't know about you, but I've been listening and really enjoying the podcast, The Big Dig. And I don't know if any of you have done that, but it is fascinating to hear those voices from the past as thought about in our current situation. Transportation, whether it's the big picture transportation with the MBTA and the sort of whack-a-mole environment that we're living in right now, or whether it's micro-transportation, everything in between. It's a really, really critical aspect of our businesses and our community. Number 2 on the list is workforce support and childcare. Being able to develop a workforce. I was talking with Ellen Maloney from the Newton Wellesley Hospital earlier this summer about what are the biggest issues that they're seeing and just developing an actual nursing staff. And so developing our workforce, and again, of course, doing things like getting transportation and housing for our workforce and providing childcare. This is really critical, and we intend to focus on that in the years to come. Next on the list is climate change. I was really happy to see that in town meeting this week, Needham has joined the other 3 communities in approving the adoption of the I'm probably going to get the name wrong because it's such a long name, but it's the specialized opt-in. Thank you. Yes, and it's so important. It's a very important thing for us all to be involved in. But it's the kind of thing that also makes me think, well, this is going to impact business owners. This is going to impact residents. This is going to impact contractors. So we need to have a really broad view of how these things get implemented in this new opt-in stretch code, which is so important. Fourth thing is diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've done a lot of work in the past couple of years with the Business Leaders of Color list and other efforts. It's great, it's important, but it's not enough, and we're going to continue to do more. So that's one of the other major things that we're working toward. The fifth and final one is housing. You know, to take a step back for a second, I always feel the morning after Halloween, like all of a sudden I've hit this ski ramp and I didn't realize I was on it, and you're just racing toward the holidays, and it's overwhelming. You've got too much to do, all the things you're supposed to be doing. You want to really enjoy it. And I also often think about people who don't have security in housing and don't have safety in housing. It's so important that we continue to work toward this. I think the MBTA Communities Act is an incredible mechanism, and I think the work that all of our towns and communities have done and will be doing is going to be an important piece of this. So with that, what I want to do is introduce our guest speaker. Larry Siemens of Family Aid has been the president and CEO of Family Aid since 2019. Larry has a 35-year career centered on public policy, housing, and child poverty. Family Aid is a Boston-based organization identified by Jeffrey Bezos' Day One Family Fund in 2019 as one of 28 leading nonprofits moving the needle on family homelessness, and by Charity Navigator as one of America's top 10 charities working to end homelessness. I'm just going to read you their mission statement, and then I'll turn it over to Larry to say the rest. But the mission is that Family Aid empowers parents and caregivers facing homelessness to secure and sustain housing and build strong foundations for their children's futures. And amen to that. It's so critical right now with everything that's going on, and it will be, Larry's going to tell you about something going on in Newton that is terrific. And so I'll stop talking and say, please welcome Larry Siemens.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, John, for that very kind introduction, and I'm honored to be sharing the stage later today with you and Greg. Rochelle, Rich, and Michael, each in your own way, have done so much to enrich our community's lives, so thank you so much. Yep. Oh, sorry that? Oh, great. Thank you. So I wanted to thank everyone again for today, and it's great to see so many of our supporters here. First and foremost, Newton Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller and members of the Newton City Council. Thank you so much over the last 5 months for your support as we work together to move the needle on family homelessness. On that point, John and Greg asked me today to share some reflections and context on our Commonwealth's current state of emergency. The largest increase in family homelessness in our Commonwealth's history. It's literally making headlines. If you're not reading the paper, you can't get past the metro section to hear what's happening. 21,000 children and parents living in shelter right now. 50% are our neighbors and our friends who have fallen into homelessness because of challenges with the economy, and 50% new arrivals. So for the context, it's still a little early. People's coffee's just starting to hit. We're going to do a little Jack LaLanne calisthenics. Everybody ready? All right, we're going to get a little busy here. I know it's early, but this will help the coffee go down, okay? It's going to do us all some good. And I'm going to ask you to do a little calisthenics. I'm going to ask you to do a little reflection. And I'm going to ask you to have some bravery. All right. So right now, for a moment, we're just going to center ourselves. I want everyone to think for a moment about your childhood. And I want to think about your family and your family's history. All right? I want you to think back in time. Okay, here we go. I'm going to ask people now to do their calisthenics. And we're going to ask you to go for the brave first. Anybody here, like myself, who grew up in a family that had difficulty sometimes putting food on the table and paying the bills. Anyone brave enough to raise their hands? Great. Anybody who grew up in housing, shared housing like me, with lots of other people to get by, or public housing? Raise your hands. Keep your hands raised, by the way. This is the calisthenics. We've got to build those arm muscles. Okay. Anybody here became a U.S. citizen as a child or an adult? Anybody in the room? Great. Anybody had grandparents? Keep your hands raised. Anyone who had grandparents who emigrated to the United States? Anybody whose great-grandparents immigrated to the United States looking for a better life? Okay. How many of you have family members who came here to escape tyranny? Second hands coming up, here we go. And how many of you's family were brought here because of tyranny? Were brought here unwillingly because of tyranny, your ancestors? Look around the room. If you kept your hands up, it would be most of us. That's who we are as an American people. Finally, all of us, one last time, any of you who believe in the American ideal and the American dream? Thank you. That's our exercise for the day. Now I want to put your thinking caps on. What does that have to do with our family homelessness crisis? What do our histories have to do with an 8-year-old girl who I met last week, whose mom, a working mom in one of our communities here, who couldn't make ends meet, who couldn't pay the high cost of childcare, the high cost of renting, and the next thing you know, thanks to a not-so-nice landlord, found themselves out on the street and evicted. What do we have to do with her? What do we have to do with a family that has traveled thousands of miles looking for a better life, only to find out that the jobs and the housing that they were promised aren't there? What do we have to do with that? And I think the answer is everything, right? The families, the 21,000 children and parents who are living in shelters right now are a reflection of our own past, our own history. They are us and we are them. They're not cargo, and they're not numbers, and they're not about budgets, or the fact that we have policies in our federal government that don't work. They're human beings whose lives and dreams are just like ours. Like us and our forebears, they're coming here because of a confluence of a global immigration crisis caused by civil strife and the climate, and here domestically with a massive shift in our economy out of the urban core, right, that has affected working class Americans. What John forgot to mention, I think, about Family Aid is that we have been around for 107 years. We're the Old Travelers Aid Society. We were founded to help new arrivals and families in poverty find a better way. And what we know is that what we're experiencing today is nothing new. Over the history of our Commonwealth and our country, we have always had moments where two things collide: the global economy, conflict, and poverty. And when those two things happen, it's actually the children and the parents who suffer the most. And that's what we're seeing. History also shows us that when those two things collide, the aftermath is a better economy. Our economy has grown through hardworking individuals who want to work and new arrivals who want to be part of the American dream. So there is promise for us coming down the future. And right now is the opportunity. Do you know we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country, 2.6%. It's actually not good for the economy. We have to get people to work. Many of us in this room, and I've spoken with many of you, including Family Aid, we can't find enough workers to help. Just as John said, this is where the Chamber's strategic plan becomes so very, very important. So there's a lot of work to do, a lot of really hard work to do. We've got to do a couple things, and I'm very, very appreciative of our state and federal officials, especially Representative Jake Auchincloss, who's at the forefront of trying to fix a system that doesn't work right now. Families are being allowed to come into the United States legally, but they don't have their legal right to work for a year. That's why they're in shelters. And that's compounded by the many families here who are struggling to find enough jobs to make a living. So while our government and the machinery of democracy slowly turns, the good news is that our community, all of you, are stepping up. Chamber members, the Chamber of Commerce, the membership is making a difference right now. In Newton, with the support of the city leaders and many community providers who are in the room, Family Aid is going to open up in the springtime a 2-acre family navigation center for families struggling with homelessness. We're going to be providing education, job training, and temporary housing for up to 100 children and parents at a time, right in the center of Newton. And that would not have happened. It took us 5 months through a community process, and the community has been nothing but welcoming and supportive. Members of the Chamber have stepped up. Newton Wellesley Hospital, who here's today, William James College, LaSalle University have all begun to work with us to ready our families with job training and supports as they wait for their work visas. And while they're training, organizations like the John Berry Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, is opening its doors so that children in our care have a little joy in their life while their families are struggling through this. Several institutions and Chamber members, TD Bank, Eastern Bank, and others are stepping up to support Family Aid and similar programs as charities to help make sure that we can deliver on our promise to the families. And together, I think we can all meet this moment to welcome a new generation of willing and able workers. And most importantly, to help children, the second generation, have healthy and happy lives to become strong adults and contributors to our society. That's how I believe the Chamber and its membership and we are meeting the moment, and how the Chamber's already leading into its strategic plan. That gives me a lot of hope for all those kids and parents. So I'd encourage each of you, if you haven't already, to consider how you can help turn this state of emergency into an opportunity of promise for so many children and parents who are here for a better life just like our own families. So on their behalf, thank you for all you have done. Thanks you for all that you may do and the many good works we all need to do to keep our community going. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. 21,000 children and adults, which is almost pretty close to the population of Wellesley, right? Wellesley is 28,000. Just think about that, the size of one of our communities. Thank you very much for that. A couple of quick things that people I just wanted to mention. First, Chris Allen and the Marriott team, thank you so much for this morning. Last night at the Marriott, their dishwasher broke after a big event. Chris Allen was actually washing dishes this morning. But that's also why we have water bottles on the table this morning. It's because of that. It's just wanted to mention that. And to all the volunteers who helped make this morning possible. So every year, the Chamber honors a member of our community for their outstanding service to our communities. This year's R.L. Tennant Award honoree is unique in that our recipient, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, not only served in our communities and helped us, as Mayor Fuller will tell you in a few minutes, but our entire nation during the COVID-19 pandemic. I've asked Mayor Fuller to present this award, and I'm going to bring it up in a minute. But I also want to, is Dr. Errol Norwitz with us? I know he was hoping to attend. And we have the Newton Wellesley folks and John Fogarty from Newton Wellesley and John Fogarty from the BID Needham. Let's just give a round of applause to all of those folks in the front line. who provided the guidance along with the CDC that we all depended on throughout the pandemic, and we're so grateful to all of those folks in the medical community who did that. And I also want to acknowledge our new friends at Boston Children's Hospital and welcome them to Needham as they're building a new facility here. We're grateful to all of you and your team for being there when we need you most. And Mayor Fuller, we're grateful to have you today to introduce our speaker.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here because we actually need each other. We need to know each other, and we have to support each other and support the businesses and nonprofits in our communities. And to Greg Riebman and your team, your leadership has been essential, especially in these difficult years. Thank you. So you got a small glimpse of Larry Siemens and a sense of what Family Aid are doing. They are transforming a vacant nursing home on Washington Street, not far from here in Newton, into 42 apartments of desperately needed emergency shelter for, as he described, Massachusetts and newly arriving families. Every single one of them will have children. But what's exceptional in my mind is that Larry and his team are doing this not just with care and great capacity in the work for the people who are living inside the building. You can see he is already networking and collaborating with so many of us here in the room. If your organization is about to be mentioned, will you just stand up? Because Larry, I'm going to say, is a Newtonian, is working with, again, if you're part of these organizations, Newton Wellesley Hospital, stand up, William James, Family Access, LaSalle University, stand up, the Newton Food Pantry, the Newton Public Schools, and our city councilors. All of you just stand up. That's the power of what happens when we know each other and support each other and work with each other. Thank you. I'll also just add one more thing that's really exceptional about Larry and his team. Something that I keep trying to learn from, because he's doing his work with continual communication, active listening, and genuine responsiveness to the needs of the people who will be living there, as well as to the community and his immediate neighbors. He's our role model of how you do excellence in management and leadership. Thank you, Larry. And I'm going to keep going, and this is a little Newton-focused, but I want to bring in the folks from Needham, Wellesley, and Watertown who are also doing this work. Housing is the greatest challenge to the economic health of the Commonwealth and to our quality of life here in Newton and in all 4 of our communities here. I want to thank all the planning teams in all 4 communities, and in particular, I know really well Barney Heath and the team in Newton, who for 3 years and hundreds of hours of meetings have displayed excellence in leadership, management, and character. And similarly, in all 4 communities, but to the Newton City Council, and particularly the Zoning and Planning Committee. There's a bunch of you. Stand up if you're on Zoning and Planning, or if you're part of the City Council, and if you're planning to vote yes for the VCOD. Stand on up, because it takes courage in this world to do that. Thank you. Now I get to turn to one more Newtonian, Dr. Rochelle Walensky. I am in awe that she chose, she didn't have to do this, she chose to be the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. What courage she has, and what selflessness. She stepped forward at a time of conspiracy theories questioning medical science, a period of heated discourse with attacks, lies, and yes, threats for leaders. And during an era when one of our most treasured institutions, the CDC, became fair game. And we often use the words public servant, but I can't think of anyone who more exemplifies its true meanings, because Rochelle brought her life's work, her impeccable credentials and deep experience into that bright spotlight to lead the world's premier public health agency. And she did it knowing that the microscope would be flipped onto her. And she did it understanding that she definitely would become the object of character assassination. There is nothing more admirable than stepping forward to serve our government, our country, our people under such tumultuous circumstances. And she was nice enough to give me her cell phone number so I too could call. She is noble, she is brave, she is extraordinary. So you see, with Larry Siemens working on the front lines of homelessness and Rochelle Walensky working on the front lines of medicine, that there are indeed heroes among us. I'm honored to introduce our RL Tennant Award winner, Dr. Rochelle Walensky.
Thank you so much, Mayor Fuller. Thank you so much, all of you, the Chamber, Greg. This is truly an honor, and certainly actually one I never expected. I thought I would just take a few minutes without really scripted remarks to just talk about well, just what the community has meant to me, and maybe a little bit about CDC. I knew when I took a phone call, an unexpected, unsolicited phone call for a job that I never applied to, asking me if I would take on being the director of the CDC, that it would be the hardest thing that I had ever done. I knew I would be moving to Atlanta, and I never really realized how much my Newton community would mean to me as I left it, moving to Atlanta. I will say it was remarkable. Certainly the mayor, who I have been in frequent touch with, I will say our healthcare workers in this community, and there are so many of you, our public health department, our state and local public health department, which I think many had not sort of appreciated. And then I will say our police department, and who I was in touch with more than I would like to admit. Before I had a security detail, after I had a security detail, and to this day. And I also want to just thank the local community members and maybe just give you a flavor of a day in the life of Rochelle Walensky in 2021, 2022. So many of you baked cookies, sent texts or notes of thanks, maybe a bottle of hand cream at my doorstep. And those seem like pretty small gestures. But I want to take you to a day where my name and a really unattractive picture is above the fold of a major newspaper. I'm in Atlanta doing press on a controversial topic that was mine to adjudicate. I'm flying back on a flight from Atlanta back to Newton on a late night. And there are a lot of people watching media around me that are not happy with me. I'm wearing the same clothes that I wore that day in all of those media hits. It's been a rough day. And I get home and there's a box of cookies. That means well more than you can imagine. Because the news all around is that people are unhappy with the decisions, and you don't hear the voices of the people as loudly until you get home to that box of cookies. So I do want to say thank you to the Newton community for everybody. The people who called me to let me know when I might not have been home, and I wasn't home a lot, that there were protesters outside my house. The people who called me as they were driving by because the bomb squad was at the house. And asked if we were okay or if my kids needed anything. And so it is that community, that is all of you, that got me through some really, really hard times. And I especially want to thank the mayor. I will say that on March 6th, 2020, I was minding my own business as the chief of infectious diseases at Mass General. I did not have the mayor's phone number in my back pocket, and I would guess she didn't know who I was at the time. But I got a phone call from our lab at Mass General saying that we had the first 2 cases of what would become SARS-CoV-2 in the state. And I made a lot of phone calls that day, and one of them was to try and find the mayor's phone number. But when I did, she took my call, and we talked, and most of the questions she had for me, my answer was, I don't know. But we spent a lot of time talking about what we needed to learn and how we were going to handle SARS-CoV-2 for the hospital, some of the things that we were doing, and some of the things that we needed to do in the community. So I do want to say thank you to this Newton community, which has been unwavering in support and which has led me through some really incredibly difficult, challenging times. I thought I would talk a little bit about CDC, and this is the only question I will have for you, and I would love for you to be honest. Who had heard of the CDC before 2019? Way more than the average American. So I'm an infectious disease doc, and prior to the pandemic, if I put C in my Google bar, CDC came up. We use CDC all the time, CDC resources all the time. But many people had never heard of CDC until COVID-19, and people really don't necessarily recognize what the CDC does, because when public health is working, you all don't know about it. CDC is an organization of about 13,000 full-time employees and about another 13,000 contractors. We are located in Atlanta because we were established in 1946 to eradicate malaria, which was actually plaguing Atlanta at the time, and paid Emory University $10 so that we could have 100 acres of land on which we currently reside. People think CDC, maybe people think CDC is in Atlanta, many still think it is in DC, but CDC has offices all over the country and all over the world for the work that we do. So our health statistics office is in Hyattsville, Maryland. Our vector-borne disease office is in Fort Collins, Colorado, as well as in Puerto Rico. We have occupational safety and health offices in Morgantown, West Virginia, Cincinnati, Ohio, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as well as in Spokane, Washington, and in our circumpolar office in Anchorage, Alaska, where we do a lot of work with the Indian tribes and food security. We have offices in 60 countries protecting global health security and in 6 regions around the world, and about 2,500 employees who live not only in country, but then we have locally employed staff so that we can really be certain that as we are training people in those countries, that we actually can do so in a culturally sensitive way. And so all of this work is to protect the health and safety of all Americans. Now, what health, safety, and I would say security of all Americans. You all probably heard about CDC through COVID-19, perhaps on your daily news, for probably more than you wanted to hear about it. And COVID-19 was something that I knew I was going to have to tackle when I came to the CDC, and I was sworn in an hour after the president. I did not expect a national monkeypox or mpox outbreak. I did not expect a Sudan Ebola outbreak that was in Mubende, Uganda, where we have a staff of over 100. I didn't expect 2 Marburg outbreaks, but Marburg is a cousin of Ebola, one in Equatorial Guinea, which is on the west coast of Africa, and a simultaneous one in Tanzania. I didn't expect our first paralytic polio case for the first time in over a dozen years in Rockland County, New York. And in 2021 alone, we had 63 foodborne outbreaks. In addition to welcoming 80,000 Afghan refugees into the United States, none of whom had yet had a medical screening, and all of whom were screened by CDC employees. 44 measles cases were found in that screening. Active measles cases were found, none of which made it into the community. So the work of CDC, I will say, I had frequently said, it is raining infectious diseases. How is this happening? But I will say that there is no doubt in my mind that more and more outbreaks are happening and will continue to happen, and that we need health and public health so desperately to work well. People know the stories of the ways that they are unhappy with the CDC. They don't necessarily know the story of they're called EIS officers, but they're well known as disease detectives, who on those first early days of COVID-19 rappelled out of helicopters to drop test kits onto the Diamond Princess cruise ship. Or the phone calls that I had to make to ask people to travel to Mubende, Uganda, in an Ebola-stricken land, to actually see if they could work with the local community to stamp out this Ebola outbreak. Or people we called to go door to door in Ohio after a train derailment. This is the work of public health. These are the unsung heroes. Their names you will never know. They put themselves in harm's way without hazard pay so that they can protect the health and safety of all of us. And so I want to say thank you to my colleagues in CDC, but also to my colleagues across public health who do this work selflessly, tirelessly, without necessarily their names being recognized, so that the rest of us are protected. CDC, I will say, does not just work in infectious diseases. We do a lot of work in non-communicable diseases as well. We have one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world in this country. Lots of work in maternal mortality, in opioid use and opioid overdose. Lots of work in firearm death prevention. We have 134 firearm deaths per day in this country, and in one of my darkest days in the agency, we lost a CDC employee in a mass shooting in Atlanta who worked, in fact, on maternal mortality. And work as well in mental health, cardiovascular disease, cancer screening, tobacco use, diabetes. So much work that happens that is not necessarily celebrated for the work that CDC does. Towards the end of my tenure, one of the things that I felt was really important to do for the country as well as the agency is to put a mirror up and say, CDC was founded in 1946 after the last pandemic. Let's talk about some lessons that we learned here so that we don't repeat some of the challenges that we had. And that work is ongoing within the agency. We also have a lot of work to do in Congress to say, well, CDC has a responsibility to do some of these things, but they actually don't have authorities to do some of these things. So you may or may not recognize that data in the absence of a public health emergency is reported to the CDC voluntarily. So you can imagine there are communities that are not interested in reporting those data or interested in reporting biased data. Those are the data we get. So when you see a headline that says CDC is not reporting X, please ask the question if CDC has those data to report, because frequently we don't, and we don't receive them from local and state public health. I will also just mention that our public health infrastructure was frail before we started this pandemic, and it continues to be frail. Much work has been done, and much work will continue to be done. But I just heard a statistic from the WHO that we, around the world, are 14 million healthcare workers in deficit. We in this country are 80,000 public health workers in deficit to just do the basic standard work of public health. And that is before we had a massive attrition of public health workers due to burnout and mental health challenges and, frankly, threats to people who are working in public health. Our data systems in this country are old and frail. At CDC, we received data by fax machine, by Excel, by Microsoft, by cloud, by phone call, and our highways are not working, they are not interconnected, they are not standardized. There has been about $1 billion of investment to try and standardize our data highways across the country. That sounds like a lot of money. Major healthcare systems in this state spent $1 billion to put in Epic. We got $1 billion for the country. So it just gives you a sense of what is needed for the investment. Major work has been done. 187 healthcare facilities reported data electronically to the CDC before the pandemic, 187. By the time I left CDC, that number was up to 25,000. And that's about 20% of our healthcare facilities. So we still have a lot of work to do to have rapid data systems that are coming in so that we at CDC can see the data in real time. And then finally, our laboratory infrastructure. I don't know if you visited your state or local labs, but they don't necessarily look like the state or local or the labs of some of our highest level academic facilities. And we need those labs to be working, because as soon as we are concerned that somebody who traveled to Uganda might have a fever, and oh, by the way, they were in a territory that might have had Ebola, we really need to have that state and local lab well equipped with an upskilled workforce to be able to test for Ebola. And so that is the work that your state and local public health departments do. I believe in those partnerships. They are really strong, and we were working to strengthen them. I was asked to say, what am I doing now? I call my current state marination. I am working, I'm in an executive fellow at, believe it or not, the Harvard Law School, the Harvard Kennedy School, and the Harvard Business School. And part of what I really want to do during my time here, as I think about what my next steps will be, is to cross disciplines. I spent a lot of time on Zoom screens with a lot of lawyers in my last 3 years. And so I really want to sort of give perspective in each of these places. There are not a lot of MDs walking around in each of those settings, to give perspective of what we can do and how we can benefit in working together. I feel passionate about the workforce challenges that we have for the future, about the data challenges that we have for the future. And I don't know what my next steps will be, but I do anticipate that I will be part of trying to address some of those challenges. So let me just say it's a huge honor to receive the Tennant Award. I want to thank the community for for being there for me in a really, really challenging time. I will be forever honored and grateful for the position that I held, and I'm really, really glad to be home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Big city.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewinsky, for those comments, and whew, there's a lot there. Thank you very much, much appreciated. Okay, we've had some somber moments here, and they're important, but we want to move on now. Michael Holley is in the building, and Rich Gotham is in the building, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Celtics, but I think we're also going to talk about leadership, which is really important to all of us. So to introduce our speakers and to say hello on behalf of Needham Bank is our good friend Michelle DeSimone, who's vice chair of the Chamber's board and is the vice president at Needham Bank. And Michael and Rich, we want to get microphones on you guys, so if you don't have them already.
Good morning. Thank you, Greg. Congratulations, Rochelle. Good morning, everyone. It's a great... Whoops. And there we go. Welcome. It's great to see so many friends and customers in the room today. Needham Bank has been a proud partner of the Chamber and lead sponsor of the Fall Business Breakfast for over 10 years. And I speak for all of my colleagues here when I say it's an event we look forward to every year. On behalf of Needham Bank, I want to thank the Chamber for creating opportunities like this to recognize and celebrate our thriving local business community. We are honored to be a part of it. It is my pleasure to introduce our featured guest today. Rich Gotham is in his 20th season with the Boston Celtics and his 15th season as the organization's president. From the sales and marketing to community engagement and corporate partnerships, Rich is responsible for overseeing all aspects of Celtics business operations. Rich has been recognized for leading the team to new heights off the court. He's grown team revenue considerably, and under his leadership, the team has established new records for attendance, ticket sales, sponsorships, merchandise, and television ratings. Michael Holley joined NBC Sports Boston in April of 2017 as co-host of Town Fair Tire Boston Sports Tonight. Michael also co-hosts the popular show Brother from Another on Peacock. He's spent over 13 years as a co-host on many sports talks radio shows with WEEI. He's a former columnist at the Chicago Tribune, the Boston Globe, and is a 6-time best-selling author. Please join me in welcoming Michael and Rich to the stage.
Thank you, sir. Thanks. Should we move this chair?
Yeah, we move the chair.
Good, we'll get cozy up.
I'll move the furniture around a little bit.
Thank you.
How's everybody doing? Good.
Now for the frivolous part of the program.
Exactly. Rich, what an act to follow. We have to follow Dr. Walensky. Okay. Oh,
So I'm used to it. I followed Red Auerbach, so you know.
And you
No
did.
problem.
And
Yeah.
you did. You know, that's actually a good place to start, because most of the time, when you take over a job, you can talk about your predecessor. Yeah, the other guy did it that way, but I'm going to do something different. I'm going to bring in some new ideas. This organization is going to be better. Rich followed Red Auerbach. You really did. Red Auerbach was the president of the Celtics for many years. Red passed in October of 2006, and then I think it was April of 2007 when you took over
Right.
as
Yep.
president? And so, for those who don't know, and you should, but Red Auerbach pretty much built the NBA, great coach, great executive. And then you have Rich Gotham. I'm just kidding.
He's like the Ben Franklin of basketball. I'm not sure what I'd call myself, but he's got 16 championships. I've got one, so I think he's.
But you did this. Something good happened when you became president of the Celtics in 2007, spring of 2007. A couple of months later, the Celtics make a huge trade, bring in Kevin Garnett. And so now it's Kevin Garnett, and you have Ray Allen, who came in about a month earlier, and you already had Paul Pierce. What was that like? Especially no kids here, right? And there shouldn't be kids here. All right. So think about your first interaction or first couple of interactions with Kevin Garnett. You can cuss if you need to. What was that like for you?
It was pretty cool, actually. I wouldn't consider myself sort of a starstruck person. I'm not in the basketball business because I'm a groupie. I want to be around basketball. I love the game. I'd never met anyone like Kevin Garnett. He was truly a force of nature. And you can't really paraphrase anything Kevin says without a lot of M and Fs and words that I actually won't use here. But I do remember my first interaction with him. We'd been working on this trade for a long time behind the scenes. We finally get it done. We've got a press conference scheduled at the Garden. Kevin comes in up to what we call the elephant ramp in the Garden, where we sort of park the private cars in the back of the house. And he gets out of his car, and I walk over to him, shake hands, to say hello. And I said, hey, just thought I'd grab you before you go out there in front of the Boston media. Just a couple things you might want to think about, a couple things that might resonate with the fans. Here's a couple questions you might get. He's a pro, he knows all this stuff, right? So he's just like, okay, yeah, nods his head. Yep, good. I said, anything you need me to know? He goes, yeah. You don't hear from me, it ain't happening. I run my own shit, that's it. and I was like, okay, my agent, my sister, my wife, none of this. He's like, if it doesn't come from me, and it was like, okay, I know where things stand. But that's how he was. He had his own code, and he was an incredible leader. When your best player is your most coachable player and your hardest working player, that's gold, right? And everyone else has to fall in line. And he changed the Celtics from the perspective that we have this great history. But when I joined the Celtics, it had been 15 years since we had won a championship. It had been a few years. It took us to rebuild to get to that point where we could acquire Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen to join Paul Pierce. And what he did was he sort of connected he used the connective thread from those great teams from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, ahead to the 2000s, and allowed us as sort of the new people who were entrusted with the Celtics to actually feel like we could really be a part of what the Celtics are all about and a part of that tradition and carry that forward. So he was a game changer for sure.
Yeah, your former coach, Doc Rivers, used to say about Kevin Garnett, if you had somebody who had never seen basketball before, you just kind of drop them into a Celtics practice, you wouldn't know if Kevin Garnett was the best player or a guy who's just scrambling to stay on an NBA roster. It was just one of the most unselfish superstars that he's ever come across.
Yeah, we had this thing, you go watch a Celtics practice, and Doc, our coach, would say, all right, Leon Poe, sub in for Kevin. Kevin would look at Leon and go, sit down, I'm not coming out. It was practice. And Leon was a rookie. He'd be like, wait a minute, what?
What do I do?
Coach like, Leon, get in there. Kevin's like, sit down. And so finally, Doc would have to stop practice and say, we don't start practice up again until Kevin is willing to sit down. So Kevin reluctantly gets off the court, practice resumes, and then he starts running sprints from one end to the other while they're practicing. And, again, it's like, there's a few players you run into, they just don't make them like that anymore, or maybe ever, right? There's sort of, he was one of one, like Bill Russell was one of one, Larry Bird was one of one. We're lucky to have had some of those players, as a part of the Celtics history.
It's interesting about leadership, just to make the connection between leadership on the court with an organization like the Celtics and leadership in your position Look, so Kevin Garnett, for example, one of the characters, or one of the characteristics he would do, or one of the things that stood out about him, is that he would get a Leon Powe or some of these young players, and yes, he'd make fun of them, and he'd make it tough on them, but he'd also say, hey, let's get together, I'm going to buy you a suit. So he'd buy all the young players, he'd buy them, and nice stuff. I mean, it's Kevin Garnett, very generous. And so it's easy to see leadership there on the court and the camaraderie in the locker room. How do you display leadership in your position with the people who are around you?
It's a good question. I mean, Kevin's one of 15 players. We've got about 200 people at the Celtics, so it's a little more challenging to sort of reach out and go take someone out to lunch every day. We're not a huge organization, but
you don't buy your employees suits?
No, I don't. I don't buy myself suits. I have a goal of not wearing suits. I think I see my role, if I were to call myself a leader, is to try to instill a purpose in our organization so that everyone feels connected to something that means something to them personally. I think purpose-driven work is an incredible motivator to find a reason behind what you're doing. That's sort of like, we want to win, great, but right, so what? What's the purpose behind winning? What are we really trying to do? If you ask me, we're trying to deliver joy to people. We're trying to build community. We're trying to shine a light on important issues that otherwise no one would think about. And when we hire people, we're looking for people who care about that stuff, right? You're looking for a little something inside them. And if you hire well, leadership's a lot easier. But it's the difference between sort of the player on the court and, say, someone who's working in our finance department or our legal department. How do they feel like they're a part of it, right? And one of the things we've been really cognizant of and conscious of as the Celtics, and our ownership has supported this fully, is there's no wall between the sports side of what we do and the business side of what we do. It's all one organization, and when we win, we will win together, we will celebrate together, everyone will have done their part, everyone will be on that duck boat when we, get out on the Charles River, right? And I think it's important, that's the most important thing to me, is try to help people see the purpose. The great thing about sports, I heard the new general manager of the Red Sox say this yesterday, you're part of something bigger than yourself. And that's really an important part of what we do, and it's an important part of understanding that. It's not about you. You're a part of something that's bigger than yourself, that so many people care about. And because so many people care about it, you really have to have a pride about what you're doing, right? They need to feel better about the Boston Celtics the day after they met you than they did the day before they met you. And so, my role, I try to foster that kind of culture amongst our employees to say, this is what we're a part of, this is really important. People really care, you really have to care about, no matter what your role is in the organization. Brad Stevens was always great about this, lead from the middle, lead from your seat. There's a lot of, leadership curriculum out there that you can grab from, but ultimately, it is, be a star in your role. Whatever you're doing, be the best at that, right? And have a pride about it. And so that's what I try to do. How successful I am, probably not the best person to ask that.
Well, I think you are. I think you gave this speech to the Celtics right before they played the Pacers the other night. Did you guys see that score?
Yeah.
I was like, this is unreal. I was watching this. They have 75 points in the first half. And then they have over 100 points, like 4 minutes left in the third quarter. They scored 155 points for those who watched. They won the game by 51 points. So I know you thought, hey, maybe the team is going to be a little bit better this season. Did it kind of scare you when you see a team play that well? I mean, that was exquisite the other night.
Before I came up, I just had someone text me simply 82-0 question mark. Yeah, when you have my role, you sort of wait. Whenever the going's good, you start to get nervous. You're like, oh, wait a minute, something bad's going to happen. What's going to take us off track? If this team is really, really good and really special, I take a lot more, if anyone watched our first few games this season, on NBC Sports Boston, the broadcast.
Thank
partner.
you.
Celtics,
Thank you.
our friends here. Let's
Thank you.
go here.
Home of the Boston Celtics. Watch night
Yeah,
pregame and postgame.
Yeah. We've had two close games against really tough opponents to start the season, and then two kind of blowout wins our next two games. And I look a lot more closely at the first two games than the second two games.
Yeah.
And the reason I feel very good about our team is those first two games were played differently than we would have played in the last couple of years. We played against the Knicks. If any Knicks fans in here? Yeah, let's go. Security over here to the left. Yeah.
Like Larry said earlier, be brave.
Yeah.
Right? Come on, raise your hand, be brave.
But the Knicks and the Heat are probably the two hardest playing teams in the league that you'll play against. They don't give up, they don't quit, they don't go away. They're well coached, they're well prepared. And in both of those games, I think last year we would have had lapses that might have cost us those games. And this year, even when we sort of started missing a few shots, we didn't get off track, we got back to executing, we didn't let go of the rope. I just think we're in a different place mentally this year. So we've got a lot of talent on our team this year. Adding Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday really makes us a really hard team to play against. But I think mentally we're in a much better place. Our two young guys, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they're 25 and 26 years old. They've been around for a while. They've been in 5-6 conference finals. They've got experience, but they're young. The male brain isn't fully developed until you're 25 years old. So I
Seems early.
I can attest to that. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I was 65. Yeah, but I really feel like they're in a place where they're really stepping into themselves and able to. We talk about leadership, able to become leaders, and have the room to do that, and have the support of some really strong leaders like Drew Holiday and Al Horford in that locker room around them, who are vets but who aren't taking the air out of the room, right? So I feel good about our team, but let's find some wood here to knock on. I'll knock. It's all about it's a long haul. It's about staying healthy for the season, being healthy at the right time, and then having every team feels good about themselves this time of year. Usually, it's about having a little luck, and that involves health typically.
I'll ask you a couple more questions. I'm told there's some people in the audience who might want to ask you some questions as well. Now, you talked earlier about getting people in the organization, your employees, to care about it. And for you, you grew up here, and you grew up in the Celtics, Larry Bird Celtics, the big three, the first big three, winning championships. And so a New England kid looking at the Celtics and then working for the Celtics, that's a dream come true. It's not, you don't need to be pushed to care about it. But how about people in your organization who are not from the area, or they're from the area and they didn't grow up watching the Celtics? How do you get them invested?
It's somewhat self-selecting. I think a lot of the people who are attracted to working for us already have that feeling. Even if they didn't grow up here, they know who the Celtics are. They know what the Celtics brand means, particularly in professional basketball, the most successful franchise really in the history of professional basketball. And I think when you come in and you go through our process, you really feel it. If you come to our offices, you feel it. And we have a good way of sort of evaluating potential people we hire for whether or not they kind of fit that mold, right? We always say, like, being a sports fan isn't a qualification for working in sports. There's probably a lot of you are sports fans, you don't work in sports. You gotta love the job you're being hired for. You gotta wanna do that job really well. And I think we talk about Celtics family. I don't throw that around loosely. We work together, we're business colleagues, right? But it is more like a family because you do have that sort of shared thing that pulls you all together, which is the team. And I think trying to instill in people, you're part of a team, right? And it's a lot easier when your product is a team, right? It's harder probably in your businesses to get people to say, you got to be a good teammate, you got to be a good collaborator, you got to be a good communicator. But we can just sort of point to our team at all times and say, these are the values that we're trying to instill in our organization. And we've got these great proof points, and we've got leaders like Doc Rivers and Brad Stevens and and Joe Mazzulla and people who come in and sort of personify those values that you can always point to. So even if, let's say, someone came in with, they didn't feel that way on the way in, they're surrounded by it, right? And so it's osmosis.
And how do you, I'm sure a lot of leaders in the room, well, I hope a lot of leaders in the room ask this question. When you get to the top positions, the top position or the top positions, a lot of times there are things that you do that aren't necessarily correct, but you're up at the top and people under you may not feel empowered to tell you that, hey, you might want to try something else. And a lot of them, they want to, but maybe they're afraid that they don't have that footing yet in their careers. How do you balance, changing, making sure that you're staying on top of your game, and then letting your employees know, hey, there are times you can come to me, respectfully, you can come to me and say, hey, why don't we try it this way?
Yeah, I think it starts with having a self-awareness of everything you just said, right? And that's an increasingly important part of leadership, and from my perspective anyway, is understanding you don't have all the answers. I mean, who in this room who was leading a business knew what to do when COVID happened? Like, we were in the live events business, and live events just ceased, happening. And our business just overnight. And I can remember, I was like, I don't know what to do, but I know we all need to try to, figure this out together and hang in together. So the first thing I did is I said, every week we're going to have a full staff, full company Zoom meeting. And I didn't even know what Zoom was prior to COVID, right? So, a week later, we're having full company Zoom meetings, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do next, And I remember at one point someone said, well, it feels like we're making this up as we go along. I'm like, yeah. We're making this up as we go along, because this has never been done before. No one ever played basketball in a bubble, right, before. And so I think, you have to have a humbleness that allows people to feel like they can approach you, they can speak their mind without fear of retribution if, something they say, rubs you the wrong way. I think it's important for me personally to have people feel that way about me. But I think you're right. It's hard. I always say to people, you have to empower yourself, right? You just do. I have daughters who are in the professional world, and I'm like, you have to empower yourself. You have to, be willing to have an opinion. You have to be willing to stand behind it. You have to have the courage of your convictions. And so what I try to instill in our organization is that. It's like you might disagree with something I say. Don't be shy. Let me know. If it's hard for you, tell your boss. I try to be cognizant about reaching out into different levels of the organization. I had a meeting with a rising star at the Celtics this week because I really wanted to understand her perspective, closer to the consumer than I am on a day-to-day basis, a digital media person who really gets how our product is being consumed by a generation of fans that I didn't grow up with the phone in my hand. And I wanted to hear from her, but I also wanted to hear what her growth aspirations were for her own career and where and if I don't know that and I'm not asking that, then I'm not helping grow people and I'm not empowering people. So I feel like that's an important part of the job as a leader. You have to be cognizant of it, even though it's hard because you don't have a lot of time. You got to stop and take the time, and you've got to be pretty intentional about it.
That's a great answer. I see Greg here floating around,
Yeah.
and you know what? This is your talk radio moment.
I'll be less cantankerous than Felger is.
Yeah, that's right.
You're used to.
Lisa and Newton, you're next up.
Wow, this is loud. Good morning, Mr. Gotham. So just to tell you, I went to college with Kevin McHale, so here we had a Minnesota boy all the way from Hibbing that stayed with us his entire career, I believe. But more importantly, as we all sit here as a community, sports have gotten to be big business. So how do you get the word out to the players to be concerned about those issues, about housing and about the children in our community? I mean, I think you have a captive audience, and I would just love you to comment on how you could be mobilizing that force with the players.
It's a great question, and it's it's a really important part of our business, particularly the younger players coming in, understanding the platform they have and the responsibility they have. And the first part is it's cultivating an awareness of what some of these issues are. These are 19-year-old young men who come to us sometimes. They're not worldly. They haven't, unless it's, landed on their doorstep, they haven't, some of them came up tough and they see it in the community around them. We've got a group at the Celtics, we call them community engagement. They are an incredible group of people who have a purpose beyond basketball, which is to use our platform and to educate our players and to bring our players into what we're doing. And we find that sort of, with a lot of people, sort of, to be aware is to feel obligated, right? But if you're not aware, you don't know. So, what we were talking about this morning with homelessness and with what we're all learning about immigration and the lack of places to house people and that crisis, it's one of many, right? So we have to sort of pick our spots in those topics that will really resonate with our players, where they can really feel like they can make a difference in the community. We've, in addition to 1,500 different charitable organizations we touch every year, we've got some very specific programming built around solving for, can really solve for it, systemic racism, racial inequality, healthcare inequity, economic opportunity, educational inequity, criminal justice reform. These are our topics our players care about. They care more when they've learned more about them. And so we've got so many different initiatives, and the important thing we do is we try to get to know a player, what they really care about, and how do you match what a player really cares about based on their experience or their aspirations, and how do we then help give them a platform, not just with regard to what they're doing for the Celtics, but outside of what they're doing for the Celtics. And so it's important to understand what they're passionate about and then try to help them with that. So it's not, what do we want you to do? It's, how can we help you with what you care about? And that's the dialogue with the players.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I just want to add, I think it's interesting. You talked earlier about Garnett and how your best player does something, it kind of inspires everybody else. Jaylen Brown signs a new contract with the Celtics, has a press conference, not at the Garden, but at MIT, when he has campers around, and he's talking very openly about the racial wealth gap and how he wants to do his part in closing it, and how he wants to create a Black Wall Street in this area. And so the organization didn't make him do that. He's saying that, and now he has the power of the Celtics to kind of help make that vision come to life.
Yeah, and Jaylen's got a group of people around him. He's a corporation. He's made a lot of money and will be, but he's putting it to good use. And just a good example is he's got a group of people, from his agent to his marketing reps to his people who extend his community efforts. And I was on the phone with them a week ago saying, what's Jaylen's plan for this season? What do you guys want to get done? How can we help you do that, right? And then here's some things we think we're doing at the Celtics that Jaylen might be really interested in. It's obviously super helpful when you have a player like Jaylen who's A, so committed to social justice, and B, really intellectually curious and really wanting to learn where he can make an impact. And when you have players like that, it's gold, right? And we've had a few of them come through, and it's just, particularly if they're the really good players, because the really good players, they've got so much on their plate. They have so many people tugging on them in so many different directions. Everyone wants a piece of them. They've got commercial interests outside of their day job as a basketball player. And if you're as good as Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, that's not by mistake. The best players in our league tend to be the hardest working players as well. I mean, they work and work and work and get better and better and better. So there's so much on their plate, right? When you get someone who's got all that on their plate and still really cares, it's such a great thing to see for us as an organization.
One more question.
Sure. Last question. Make sure, no pressure. It's got to be brilliant, compelling, thoughtful. Have some humor in there too. I mean, I'm sure you got it.
Mr. Gotham, Mr. Holley, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today. Really appreciate it. One of the questions I had, I was always intrigued about, is the NBA is getting a lot younger, and you're seeing that the game is really, the veterans are kind of, feels like they're kind of getting pushed out a little bit, and you got 19-year-olds in the game, and they have to learn to be adults. They're around all of this influence of business, wealth, and really just, they're figures in their communities. So what as an organization do you do to help prepare them for those moments? Thank you.
Yeah, it's everything you just said is true. Picture yourself at age 19 and stepping into the world of professional sports. When I was 19, there was no social media, thank goodness. But they're never off, right? It's 24/7 coverage of everything they do. Any misstep you might have, whatever it may be, is documented. It's thrown out there. You're put on trial for not just the city of Boston, the whole world to see, because we're a global business and our game is followed everywhere in the world. And it's a lot of pressure to deal with, right? We've tried to build all the resources we can around them from a wellness perspective, like comprehensively, everything from the obvious stuff like strength and conditioning and rest and recovery and nutrition, but also mental wellness and how do you cope and how do you deal with all this stuff. So we've got dedicated people who are full-time employees of the Boston Celtics whose job it is to try to help our players thrive off the court so they can thrive on the court. We've got resources around the team that are sort of available to all of our players and our employees for that matter. And Brad Stevens, our president of basketball operations, Brad is a really big believer in that. For us to be as good as we can be on the court, we need to be fully formed people off the court. And so that development, particularly for the younger players, is really important. So we've got a program. And by the way, so does the league, right, and the Players Association. But we've got a program when you come to the Celtics, there's effectively, an orientation. And it doesn't end. Throughout your career, there's something going on at all times to try to help get our players to that place where they're in the best spot they can be. And selfishly for us, we want them in that spot so they can perform well on the court. But personally for all of us, when you're close to it, you really see these are young people. They're young, and they are really judged harshly quite often. And you think if you've got your own children who are in their late teens and 20s, and this is all the pressure that's around them, as a parent, you'd really want to give them all the support you could, right? And so that's, personally how a lot of us look at it at the team. It's like, that's what we need to do for these guys. And it's easy for, fans to really not think about that part of it and just sort of judge them based on how well they played the night before or whatever they might have said in a press conference. But there's, that's not all of who they are, right? So it's taking care of all of who they are, which is really important to the Celtics and a big part of our culture as well.
All right, Rich, well, if the Newton Marriott will have us, if the chamber can put it together, maybe we do this again in June after the championship. After the championship, we all
That's right. Yeah. Let's hope.
Actually, Michael, I'm looking forward to the Charles River Chamber is looking forward to that duck boat going down the Charles River Chamber.
I drove along the Charles. Charles is about a mile from my house. I drove along through Dover, Needham, Wellesley, into Newton, most days into Boston on my way in. That's I'm feeling the vibe of the Charles River Chamber here, and
there it is.
Hopefully we'll be putting a duck boat on the water for you.
Let's give him a great ride.
Good stuff. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being part of this today and for being part of our chamber and part of our communities. We're so grateful to have you active here and have you as members. Have a great day. One note, you may need a parking ticket to get out, and we have them at the door for you, so you just need a voucher. You don't need to buy anything, but you may need that to get out. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.